For 365 days, the world was defined by a specific kind of silence. Not the absence of noise, because the kennel is never quiet, and the world is never truly still, but the absence of a specific frequency, a signal lost in the static of duty. But here, on this gray stretch of tarmac, under the heavy, overcast sky of a Tuesday morning, that silence is about to break. Don't look at the bus yet. Don't look at the families clutching their homemade banners, or the officers checking their watches, or the perimeter fence rattling in the cold wind. If you want to understand what is happening here, you have to lower your eyes. You have to look at the tail. We often mistake that movement for simple happiness, a biological reflex of a pet greeting a master. But look closer. Look at the violence of it. Look at the blur. That is not a greeting. That is a physiological event. The tail is striking the side of the crate, the leg of the temporary handler, the asphalt itself with a rhythmic, bruising intensity. Thwack, thwack, thwack. It is a metronome counting down the final seconds of a year-long wait. The muscles in the hindquarters are trembling, rippling under the coarse fur, winding up like a mainspring that has been tightened every single day for 12 months. The air here tastes like diesel and rain. It is a thick industrial scent that usually signals work. For a dog like this, the smell of jet fuel and heavy engines means it is time to turn on, to sharpen the focus, to hunt. But today, the wires are crossed. The drive is there, the intensity is there, but the target is missing. The dog is scanning. The ears are rotating independently, radar dishes pivoting to catch a sound that hasn't existed in their world for a year. A voice. A specific cadence of footsteps. The familiar friction of a particular hand against the collar. To the civilian standing nearby, the crowd is a wash of noise. Cheers, crying children, the murmur of anticipation. But to the dog, that is all just interference. It is white noise. The dog is filtering, processing thousands of sensory inputs per second, discarding the irrelevant, searching for the pattern that matches the memory etched into the deepest part of its brain. They say a dog's memory is associative, linked to immediate stimuli. But anyone who has stood on a tarmac and watched a reunion knows that is only half the truth. There's a memory that lives in the blood. A memory that doesn't fade when the scent on the old t-shirt finally disappears from the laundry pile back home. Think about the grind of the last year. The grind isn't just the deployment for the soldier, it is the absence for the one left behind. For 365 days, the routine was a poor substitute for the bond. The food bowl was filled, the walks were taken, the training was maintained. But the feedback loop was broken. The hand that held the leash didn't have the same weight. The voice that gave the commands didn't have the same resonance. The dog has been operating in a state of suspended animation, a high-performance machine idling in neutral, waiting for the gear to engage. And then, the sound changes. The bus engine drops an octave as it shifts into park. The pneumatic hiss of the air brakes cuts through the chatter of the crowd. The doors fold open. The dog freezes. The tail stops its violent rhythm for a split second, suspended in the air. The nose lifts, dissecting the wind. The wind has shifted, carrying the air from the bus toward the waiting line. This is the moment. The visceral hook of reality. It isn't the sight that hits first. It's the scent. Molecular confirmation. The whine begins low in the throat, a high-pitched, vibrating frequency that sounds almost like pain. It is the sound of a pressure valve failing. The discipline, the months of obedience training, the sit, the stay, the wait, begins to fracture under the weight of pure, unadulterated instinct. The first boot hits the pavement. Coyote brown, worn leather, dust from a continent away still trapped in the laces. Then the second. The gait is tired, heavy, but familiar. The silhouette emerges from the shadows of the bus interior, stepping into the flat, gray light of home. The reaction is instantaneous and total. The leash goes taut. The temporary handler has to lean back, digging heels into the tarmac to keep from being pulled over. The dog is no longer here. The dog is projecting itself forward, clawing at the asphalt, desperate to close the gap. The bark is not a warning. It is a summons. It is a desperate, hacking cry that tears at the throat. I am here. I am here. You are here. When the handler sees it, that blur of fur, that desperate energy, the fatigue of the deployment vanishes. You see the bag drop from the soldier's shoulder. It hits the ground with a heavy thud that no one hears because the world has narrowed down to a corridor of empty space between two souls. The soldier drops to a knee. This is the contact. This is the collision. The dog hits the handler with the force of a linebacker, nearly knocking them backward. There is no grace in it. It is a frantic, chaotic scramble of paws and fur and tongue. The tail is a weapon now, whipping back and forth with enough force to leave bruises. The dog is making sounds that don't belong in a tactical manual. Soft, broken yelps. Deep, guttural groans of relief. The handler's hands are buried deep in the fur, gripping the scruff, the neck, the ears, grounding themselves. The soldier buries their face in the dog's neck, breathing in the smell of home, the smell of loyalty that hasn't changed while the rest of the world turned upside down. For a moment, the perimeter is secure. The threat assessment is zero. The hypervigilance that has kept the dog wired for a year dissolves. You can physically see the tension leaving the animal's frame. The spine softens. The ears pin back in submission and joy. The frantic licking of the face is an attempt to verify, over and over again, that this is real. You are solid. You are salt and sweat and skin. You are back. The crowd is cheering, cameras are flashing, families are weeping. But inside the circle of that embrace, it is quiet. It is a private conversation happening without a single word. It is the restoration of the pack. The alpha has returned, and the watch is over. But the story doesn't end on the tarmac. The narrative continues into the decompression. Cut to the interior of a truck, an hour later. The chaos of the arrival is gone. The banners are folded, the bags are packed in the bed. The highway stretches out ahead, a long ribbon of gray under the rain. The silence in the cab is different now. It isn't the heavy, empty silence of the waiting year. It is a warm, full silence. The dog is in the back seat, or perhaps riding shotgun, defying the regulations because today, the regulations don't matter. The energy has spiked and crashed. The adrenaline dump has left them both exhausted. The dog is fighting sleep, the heavy eyelids drooping, forcing them open every few seconds to check. Are you still there? Yes. Ideally, the dog's head is resting heavily on the center console, or pressed against the soldier's shoulder. The breathing is slow, rhythmic, deep. This is the unspoken. This is the covenant. We spend billions on technology, on drones, on sensors, on satellite uplinks. We train for years to master the art of warfare. But when the dust settles, when the uniform comes off, when the noise of the world fades away, we are reminded of the oldest truth in the history of conflict. We don't fight for flags. We don't fight for politics. We fight for the thing behind us. And sometimes, the only thing that truly understands the weight of that fight is the creature that waited by the door, holding the watch, keeping the ghosts at bay. They say you can't buy loyalty. That's true. You have to earn it. And you earn it not by the commands you give, but by the return you promise. The dog didn't care about the war. The dog didn't care about the medals. The dog cared about the promise. I will come back. And today, the promise was kept. The signal has been re-established. The 12-month silence is broken. And as the truck rolls down the highway, heading toward a driveway that hasn't seen those boots in a year, the only sound that matters is the steady, rhythmic breathing of a best friend who can finally, truly close their eyes.